Hello class, I hope you enjoyed your spring break, or at least your break for your IEW assignment. You've had 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks, to work on your second and third body paragraphs on topic B and on topic C. So, I'm looking forward to reading those. So far, you should have turned in your topic A, and most of you have gotten those back already. And then right now you've just recently turned in topic B and C, the paragraphs on those second and third body paragraphs. So those are what I'm going to be reading and getting back to you quickly. I'm going to note them up. I'm going to write all over them and send them back to you. So all your body paragraphs should have corrections written on them within the next couple days. But here's the thing. You don't need to make any of those corrections yet. I don't want you to be rewriting your body paragraphs right away. You might get my corrections back and say, oh, I need to fix all these things so that when I turn it in at the end of the week, it looks so beautiful. Don't do any of that yet. Just turn in your body paragraphs at the end of the week the way they are. We're gonna work on revising next week. So first, let's just focus on finishing our essay, getting all of the elements of our essay finished. That's what you're gonna work on this week. That means basically, since you've already done all 3 body paragraphs and your bibliography, this week you're going to be focusing on your introduction paragraph and your conclusion paragraph. Once you have all these things, you should have every element of your essay complete. You'll have your introduction at the beginning, that'll be the first page. You'll have your body paragraph A on the next page. Body paragraph B and C will either be on the next page or on the next 2 pages, depending on how you wrote them. All separate pages is fine, since you were writing them on different weeks. Then your conclusion paragraph, then your bibliography, and then your checklist. Those are the things you're going to be turning in at the end of this week. Don't worry about them being perfect, because we are going to have another week to work on perfecting our essay. First of all, you're just going to turn it in at the end of this week, and I will note anything that I think could use a little correction or a little clarification, and then we'll do a final draft next week. So turn your stuff in, but don't worry about it being perfect, especially the body paragraphs. Don't need to make any changes there. Do complete your work though. Make sure you're not being like, oh, we get to make changes, so I think I haven't finished the conclusion, but whatever. Do finish it and turn it in, and then we'll make the little tiny adjustments next week. So this week's goal, like I said, is to finish our essay. Every single part, every paragraph, and the bibliography. Which means you're going to work this week on the conclusion first and then the introduction. We're going to write them in reverse order. So let's talk about conclusions. We've done conclusions before, and I think you guys are pretty good at it. The elements of a conclusion are restatement of the topics. That should take 1 to 3 sentences. I like 1 better than 3 personally, but sometimes it's easier just to restate each one in a separate sentence. So either way is fine with me. Next, after we restate our topics, we need to tell what's most significant about your topic. For Faces of History, you've chosen a person. So think, what's the most important thing about their life? Maybe I wrote about it, maybe I didn't, but I should tell what's the most significant thing. Or try to answer the question, why did I even want to talk about this person in the first place? Why is it worth remembering them in history? Why haven't we taken them out of history books? Why are they so important to history? So that would be the most significant area. Think about that. And then the final sentence is just what it is, the final sentence. Try to wrap it up somehow and put a nice little period, a nice little bow at the end with your final sentence in whatever way that makes sense to you. I wrote for you guys this week. Actually, I wrote this morning. I wrote you guys a sample essay. I pretended that I had a Faces of History project myself about King David. And I just kind of plunked it all out, a nice 5-paragraph essay. And it doesn't have all the elements of style that is going to be required of you guys, but it does have all the elements of structure. So I want you guys to be able to read that sample essay on King David and notice how all the structure of an essay fits together. Now, you might have to pause the video, but I want you to get yours out. Get out your sample essay. And we're going to look at the conclusion and the introduction together. So go ahead and get that now. Okay, now that you have your essay, or your sample essay, I want you to skip down to the final paragraph, the conclusion. Now notice the first thing we need in this is a restatement of topics. Now we know from the beginning, if you kind of looked, that the statement or the topics are young David, the rise to king, and David's reign. So those are the three different topics I'm going to talk about, basically different parts of his life. So I'm going to restate all of those topics in one sentence. Remember, you guys feel free to use 3 sentences. I prefer one, and that's what I did. It says, "No one but God could have known David would go from a youngest son and a shepherd to a mighty king whose reign brought such prosperity." If you already found the grammar mistake, good for you. So notice the first time I mention a topic is when it says youngest son. That points back to the fact that my topic is young David. The second one, and a shepherd to a mighty king. When I said he became a mighty king, that points back to his rise to kingship. So I'm mentioning my second topic. And then the last part says, whose reign brought such prosperity. And that points back to my third and final topic, which was David's reign. And you'll notice if you actually read the paragraph about his reign, I talk about his prosperity, what he brought to Israel because of his kingship. So that sentence makes sense. It points back to the paragraph about the prosperity of David's reign. So the next portion, the next couple sentences, are what's most significant, what's so important about David anyway. And it says, David's life and reign were important, so I'm helping you guys out there, because they are part of God's plan to save the world from sin. David's faith and devotion to God is an example to the saints of how to live and how to repent from sin. Also, in accordance with God's promises, David even got to be an ancestor to Jesus. That's just some facts, some ideas that I thought, this is what's really important about David. Those things weren't explored super detailed in the body paragraphs, but when I boiled it down, I was like, this is what's important about David. This is why I would even want to talk about him, why he would be a good candidate to be a Faces of History person if it was on Bible times, not medieval times. My final sentence is just kind of what it is, a final sentence. David's life is an inspiration, an example to many, and will continue to be as long as his story is told. So no one can really argue with that. It's just kind of a plain, simple, feel-good statement about David. And that's what I ended my paragraph with. So conclusions are easy. I think that you guys won't have any trouble writing your conclusions. So after you've finished your conclusion, I think the next thing you're probably going to end up doing is to write your introduction. We save the introduction for last for a couple of reasons. One of them is because once we've written our body paragraphs, then we're really sure what our topics are, what our A, B, and C topics are. We know them for sure now. We could have changed our mind when we found out maybe the original topic C we picked a different topic because there wasn't much information and we changed it. So now that you have your main topic set in stone and you know what statement you're making about each one, you have all the information you need to write your introduction. The other reason it's nice to wait is because background information is part of an introduction. And we wrote a lot of facts in our body paragraphs, right? And some of you will notice on your corrected homework, the homework that I sent back you, I would ask little questions in the margin. I would say like, wait, when did this happen? Or who is this person? Those are questions that I asked because I was confused. When I read your fact or your explanation, I was like, I'm not sure I understand this fully. And a lot of the time what was needed for me to understand it better was more background information. So you have two options when you see those corrections in your body paragraph. You can either fix it right there in the body paragraph and explain a little more, or you can give that information in your introduction. You can use some of your introduction space to give me background information that will help me understand the rest of the essay. So let's look at the one in the King David example. So the first thing I do, the first element of an introduction is the attention grabber. You can use a lot of different things. You can use a very short sentence. You can ask a question. You can give a shocking or surprising fact, a little known fact. Or you can use a quote, which is what I did. So mine says, "Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." And that's a quote from the Bible, from 1 Samuel. And if I was writing a bibliography, I would have to put 1 Samuel in my bibliography because I just quoted it. I used it as a source. So just so you know. So man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Now the whole next couple sentences is background information. These were the words spoken on the day young David was named to be the future king of Israel. Israel, we know we're talking about Israel. That's background information. In those days, around the 10th century BC, more background information, we have a time frame. Israel needed a leader who was blessed by God and who would follow God with his whole heart. So I'm telling what Israel needed at this time. That's important background information. The people had rejected God as their only king and asked for a human king to lead them as well. More background information. God listened to them and gave them a man named Saul, who failed many times to honor God properly. So I'm giving the background information that there was a king before David and he had failed at honoring God. Now a new king is needed, and God chose a young man named David of Bethlehem to be their new leader. So that's the end of the background information. I mentioned the young man David, so I've introduced our new character, the person who the rest of our essay is going to be about. I mentioned that he's young, at least in the beginning, and that he's from Bethlehem. So that's all little bits of background that's going to help you guys understand the rest of the essay. You guys can decide on your own what you think is important background information. You can also, and you should also, ask your proofreader or your editor, whoever's going to read your essay before you turn it in to me. Ask them if there's anything confusing and if there's anything that would, any kind of background information that would be helpful to put in your introduction. The final thing in your introduction that you need is to introduce your topics. You can do this in 3 sentences because you have 3 different topics, or you can do it in 2 or even better, 1 sentence. You guys are getting old enough where I think that trying for 1 sentence is a noble goal. The older you get and the more mature your writing gets, the better off you are doing just 1 sentence. But sometimes it's easier to write 3, and I'm okay with that. I did 1 here, and I'll show you how I did it. I wanted to mention all 3 of my topics, which are young David, the rise to king, and David's reign. So I have to somehow pull all those into 1 sentence, and I want to make a statement about it. I want to say something about it. So I said, this David began as the youngest son and shepherd of no importance, and because of God's will became king and ruled Israel as a man after God's own heart. So my statement is that he became a king after God's own heart, and that it was by God's will. My topics are the part that's bold. So this David began as the youngest son and shepherd. Cha-ching! That's my first topic, young David, of no importance. And because of God's will became king. Cha-ching! Second topic, and ruled Israel. Cha-ching! Number 3, as a man after God's own heart. So I managed to list each of the topics in 1 sentence. And you guys can do this too. My only request for you guys for the introduction of your topics is that you don't use the phrases, my topic is, or next we will talk about. I want you to make your sentences independent, meaning I want you to say something about your topic. So if you wanted to talk about young David and just give 1 sentence to introduce that topic, I would not want you to say, my first topic is young David. That wouldn't really work for me as an interesting or specific topic sentence or statement introduction of a topic. Instead, I want you to make a statement about your topic. So instead of the first topic is David is young, I would want you to say something like, as a young person, David was a shepherd and the youngest son. Something like that. Make a statement about it. And then your second sentence, you would say, becoming king. Later on, he became king of Israel by God's will. Period. And then you could follow that with, for 40 years he ruled Israel as a man after God's own heart. So, whether you do it in 1 sentence or 3, make sure it's got good style and makes a statement about the topic. That's all I have for you guys today, other than our flow challenge. So we've been working on flow. It's one of the optional things that you can add to your essay to make it more stylistic and just to make it read easier. And what flow means is one idea flows into the next. 1 sentence flows into the next sentence. 1 paragraph flows into the next sentence. So you're going to practice, if you are able, to use a special kind of because clause. You already use because clauses really well. So we're going to add a because of this clause. So basically you'll write a sentence that says a fact, and then your next sentence, instead of just stating a new fact, your next sentence will say because of this, which points back to the sentence you just wrote. Because of this, blah, 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 blah. So, for example, if your first sentence said, David was an expert at slingshot throwing. I don't really know. Slingshotting? I don't know. David was an expert with the slingshot, period. Your next sentence could start with a because of this clause. Because of this, comma, he chose a slingshot over a sword when he faced Goliath. So you see we've created flow by connecting one sentence to the next. David was good at the slingshot, period. Because of this, because he was good at the slingshot, he chose a sling over a sword. So that's something that you can add to your paragraphs this week to add more flow, to get better seamless writing. So I'm looking forward to reading all of your work. I'm looking forward to seeing what you turn in. At the end of this week, you're going to turn in everything. You're going to turn in your introduction paragraph. You're going to turn in all 3 body paragraphs. You don't have to change them. In fact, you're just basically turning in stuff you've already turned in, but I want to see it all together and make sure your whole essay is there. So introduction, you're going to turn in your 3 corrected body paragraphs, but you don't have to revise them. They're just going to have my notes on them. And then finally, your conclusion paragraph and your bibliography. You're going to turn in all of that and your checklist. Check everything against your checklist. Make sure your essay has everything, because now is the time to use your checklist. We've been kind of holding off because we didn't have a whole essay to look at. But now when you have your whole essay in front of you, go through that checklist. Make sure you have all the elements of style. If you're missing any, try to add them into your conclusion or your introduction, and then turn it in. I will be reading these. I will be telling you how much stuff is on your checklist and then what areas could use some work. And then next week, we'll work on rewriting them in a nice, pretty, very turn-inable looking format with all your corrections. It's going to be very beautiful, and I think you guys are going to be very proud of the work you did. That's it for this week. I am looking forward to any Zoom meetings that we have, and really more than that, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person again soon. Love you guys all. Bye-bye.